Right. So we're going to be speaking about oil and gas and industry from reform to recovery. And I think what is very important for us to bear in mind is that when you look at the oil and gas industry today, it's gone through so many significant developments. And some of these developments range from price volatility. Just before I came up today, I checked the price of the Brent crude, and it's just under $70. And I'm mindful of the fact that when we set our budgets, for this year, we set a benchmark of $75. So we've seen so many, all sorts of volatilities in the industry. Not only that, we've seen regulatory changes, right? We've seen all sorts of geopolitical tensions in the industry. And above all, we're seeing innovation, right? And when you look at the Nigerian oil and gas industry, one thing is clear, is that we're not immune from what we're seeing on the global scene. Currently, we're experiencing production decline. I took a look at the production figures from January to date. Apart from January, where we actually achieved about 1.7 million barrels, since then, we've struggled to keep up to 1.7 million barrels. In fact, we're barely meeting our OPEC quota if you strip out condensate. So those are the changes that we're seeing in the industry. But one thing is clear, is that for us to move from reform to recovery, we must have strategic planning. There must be innovation, and we must embrace change. So these are the issues that we're going to talk about. There is no doubt in my mind that we're currently on this journey from reform to recovery. So on that basis, we're going to dive right straight into the conversation. Let me start this conversation, with, the Black Roger.
I will introduce myself, don't worry.
Okay. From Seplat. What I would like you to do is to give us an assessment of what you think. We've spoken about some of the changes that have taken place in the oil and gas industry today. Last year in February, the government introduced, some incentives to reduce, the issues we have in local content, contracting cycle, turnover, and of course, approval threshold. We've also seen attempt, right, to be able to incentivize, non-associated gas for onshore and shallow water, and recently, deep water. And just about 2 months ago, the government came up with a framework, to focus on reducing costs in the industry. So what I would like you to share with us is your assessment, of those reforms that have taken place. How will you describe the current state of the Nigerian oil and gas industry?
Thank you very much, and a very good morning, everybody. My real name is Samson Ezugworie. My other name is Roger Brown, but today I chose to be black and Nigerian. When I change color, I will be Roger Brown. I will not talk about either sharing or transferring account numbers like we have heard earlier. I am the Chief Operating Officer of Seplat Energy. First of all, congratulations this day on your milestone achievement. Business Day. On your milestone achievement. And I bring you apologies from Roger Brown, who had also had to travel on a very short notice out of country for some other business exigencies. And then back to your question. So next time when you call me Samson today. Back to your question. You have very carefully outlined the reforms and the steps being taken by the current government to reposition the oil and gas sector, the energy industry in Nigeria. And you are now asking me about the assessment. So early days, I will say, we started up with the presidential mandate, but if you look at the trajectory, I would personally say that the outlook is very excellent, and we are all positioned for a very transformative oil and gas industry. Why do I say so? First is that the country is rich in both oil and gas resources. So there's no doubt about that. With over 200 TCF of gas resources, then we are in the right place. Secondly, we will see that the oil and gas industry is also being faced with a big transformation whereby the IOCs, the international oil companies, are exiting the onshore shallow water areas and transferring them to us. If you look across, you will see us. If it was like a decade plus ago, possibly the color on the table here would have been different. So the Nigerian indigenous companies, another IOC, if you really see, now is IOC to IOC, we have also demonstrated sufficient capacity and financial capability to take on these assets and run with them. But coming back to the reform itself, there is something that is happening now, and I would say there is the lining up of all the stars. So the outlook is very good, excellent, and better than it had ever been before. So reforms can be good, and as good as a piece of paper. It can also be good because given the lecture we've just listened to, there are indications for sustainability. There are indications for it to be truly implemented in an effective manner. Now, if you go back a few years ago, people will be standing here and quoting for you what is happening in the other parts of the world, in the globe. But I can give you Nigerian statistics. Based on the outlook today, there is, if you listen to Benga Komolafe recently, there is the pronouncement that we have attracted over $16 billion of investment for oil growth in the near term. That is a clear statement. But then let me break it down to one other small thing that will give you another indication. Rig count in Nigeria in 2021 was 8. Rig count as we speak today is about 46. So again, that tells you and gives you an indication of the level of activities that is actually ramping up here. And what does that tell you? There is great investor confidence, and people are now bringing money back into the country, and we are now investing. Last but not the least is that the new change we have in the NNPC today is better than we have ever seen it in the industry. In the past, we could fly from Lagos to Abuja to go and see the industry chief executive, and 5 minutes to the meeting time, they will tell you that he had to attend to other serious business issues and meeting is rescheduled. Today, the GCEO of NNPC comes down to the industry players, and there are bi-weekly meetings where we track performance and we look forward to removing blockers that are holding the industry back. I can go on and on and on,
okay,
but thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You painted a positive outlook for the oil industry. Let me come to you, Tony, right? I mean, your company is still young, so to speak, right? But, you know, given what's just been discussed, what will you consider as the operating challenges that you face, you know, doing business in Nigeria today?
Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank my brother and friend, Mr. Frank Kaibogu. Business Day. I really must invite a round of applause for Business Day this morning. Beyond this forum, it's not obvious, but over the 3 years that we battled as Renaissance to be able to take over the assets of Shell, SPDC, we met a lot of obstacles. A lot of times we were knocked down, but not knocked out. But I must confess that it took very strong voices like those of Frank and Business Day who stood up to authority to say what is wrong remains wrong and what is right can only be right. And I really must thank you, because now for me that is part of the reform. When one of the prior speakers talked about the elite consensus, it looked as if the elites are individuals. The elites can be institutions like Business Day because they stood up. And that is the only reason why I am here today as Renaissance. Really, really happy to be here. We are Renaissance, and as the name connotes, it's a new beginning. It's a rebirth, an absolute new opportunity, and from where I see it, perhaps the greatest opportunity for Nigeria. So it took 3 years for us to come alive in a bilateral deal between a willing seller and a willing buyer. Why did it take 3 years? It was all around the regulatory obstacles and everything we've had to jump through. That is unnecessary. If you just imagine that we are barely 120 days in business as Renaissance, we have increased production by 40%, both in oil and in gas. Can you imagine? Can you just imagine if that was from 3 years ago, where we will be today? So we are talking about production that we need for this country to survive. And it's very important when we talk about reform. You cannot reform what you don't control. Where is the control sitting? And I really invite you to look at this panel. And as my brother Sam just said, if this panel was 5 years ago, you have 4 Igbo men and maybe 1 Alex to join them. But today we're all here as Nigerians, which is a signal that the reform itself is already working. Nigerians are taking over. More than 50% of Nigeria's oil production today is associated with Nigerian companies. And I think that's not something you should take for lightly. But we must confirm that while the reform is on, while Nigerians are taking over, there's a lot more that needs to be done. First and foremost, I think the 3 executive orders that have been signed have been very, very helpful, and I'll speak to one of them. One critical one, which held down the industry for the 30 years of my career, was to the extent that whatever business or contract you want to sign that is higher than $500,000 or 20 million naira, you must go to government to secure approval. At the time, 20 million naira was much higher than $500,000. But with a fluctuation of time, devaluation, and all the evolutions that happened to Naira and our economy, it became more important to do business at $500,000. But this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And for 30 years, this industry was held down that you couldn't do a deal to procure service above 20 million naira or 500,000 without going to seek help from a regulator. But that is one of the reforms that the executive order has dealt to say, we raise that threshold to $10 million. And I think for me, that brings flexibility, and it speaks to one of the agility that is possible. That's where we see it as Renaissance. And it speaks to our core vision of being Afrocentric. So in partnership with government, we want to move Nigeria to that center stage where we truly become the African giant. Our vision as Renaissance is to be the African leader, enabling energy security in Africa and the industrialization of Nigeria in a sustainable manner. That's what we're about. That's what Renaissance is. And I dare say the Renaissance has begun both for company and for country. Thank you very much.
Tony, let me stay with you. If there is one thing that you can change in the regulatory operating environment in Nigeria, what would that one thing be? Just one thing.
Well, to be fair, the regulatory environment is improved, which is why we can have a picture like this. The PIA that has been passed into law was a bill for 20 years. And over the 20 years while we were romancing the bill, the rest of the world moved on. But when we passed the bill, we didn't quite take cognizance of the transition that has happened over the 20 years we were dilly-dallying. But for whatever it's worth, we now have an act. And I think that act today should be reviewed for current reality. That act doesn't take cognizance of digitalization. That act doesn't recognize AI. And today, as we are sitting here, you can't survive without AI. That act is a bit outdated on arrival. So for me, the revision of that act is the first thing. But in terms of regulatory support, you need to enable the industry. One of the biggest challenges we all face today is not the production, but is how to get the production to point of sale. And that is production versus point of sale is something in between we call pipeline. And that is all about security. Today, the regulators need to do a better job of defining what it takes to secure our pipelines and ensure that whatever we produce can get to points of sale and become value for our country, Nigeria, way ahead of the companies.
Thank you. Let me go to Bite now. Bite, Nigeria is one of the highest cost producers when it comes to hydrocarbon. And one of the things that the government has just done is that they've introduced this incentive framework, just desire to to reduce cost. One thing that I like about the framework is that it not only helps to incentivize operators to reduce cost, but also help to preserve government revenue. But there are some concerns that I have, that have been expressed, with the cost incentive framework. One of them is that it is not tiered. In other words, it does not differentiate between various levels of performance. If I exceed my target by 10% and someone exceeds his own target by 20%, we get the same thing. There is no differentiation in the level of performance. The second concern that has been expressed is the fact that it does not promote capital efficiency because it only focuses on operating cost. So that is a concern. And of course, the third issue really has to do with the fact that there is no linkage to any environmental metrics. So I would like to hear your thoughts about the effectiveness or the wise of the cost incentive framework.
All right. Thank you, Wale, for that question. And I think I'll join my other panelists to congratulate BusinessDay. Congratulations. There has been a series of implementations coming out of the Petroleum Industry Act that is being augmented by various regulations and also more recently some executive orders. Both Tony and Sam have spoken to some of those. I think the one in question you just asked me about now, which is the most recent one, is focused on cost efficiency. Unfortunately, our cost of production in Nigeria is very high because beyond normal industry cost variables, we have our Nigeria-specific imposed variables that just raise up the cost. When others are producing at low-cost thresholds, we have to think of the burden of having security in order to just get our production to the point of sale. The plethora of regulatory fees and charges we have to pay, they all add up to make the cost higher. And in recent times, as we have the Trump effect, another effect that I've seen us with lower realized prices, it just stands to reason that government's initiative for a cost efficiency target is the right thing to do. Otherwise, you find out that practically all the revenue you generate is just swallowed up in cost. So it's a fantastic idea. It's a step in the right direction. And it's one that we as operators really want to support. But I hear you very well, loud and clear, about is that the best way to go? I think the first thing is to celebrate the fact that there is a cost efficiency target and it's already driving behaviors. Those behaviors, for example, now are making us to explore more efficient ways of collaborating, sharing infrastructure, just to make sure we continue to drive down costs. As great as cost is, there are some other variables that need to be drawn into the net of that target. And for us, and for me in particular, it's around value. Because there's a way you can be lowering your cost of operation and you may be damaging value. A value focus will help us more. And when we then look at a value focus, we will then be finding out how do we leverage the serious underutilization of existing capacity we have today. On the average, operators today on the aggregate are operating at barely 60% of installed capacity. A value metric will drive us to find out how do we fill up that haulage in the installed infrastructure, so that as you are driving costs, you're also looking at how do I boost production, How do I increase all the things that just make sure what percolates to the bottom becomes a whole lot more than it would have been? And you are right, it's not a one straight bullet for everybody. It has to be horses for courses. So there are indigenous operators today that are operating in areas where their water cut is very high. If you are just saying everybody reduce cost and you're not factoring in the peculiarities from one operator to the other, you may be incentivizing a behavior that makes us on the short term want to target the benefits of the cost metrics, but on the aggregate we are losing value. So maybe a tweaking of that executive order to recognize the exigencies and the peculiarities of each operator will help us on the whole to extract more value. But clearly, without gainsaying it, cost efficiency is a target that is worth pursuing, but not at the expense of overall value delivery. And overall value delivery is about efficiency, it's about raising up install capacity, and it's also about looking at capital efficiency for CapEx. It's reviewing the entire ecosystem from what to pay for regulators, what to pay for security, what to pay for freedom and access to operate in your communities. All that put together is what will help us. There are some of them that are within our control as operators, but there are some of them that also have to be enabled by the ecosystem of regulators, government security agents, in order to achieve the objective. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me come to you, Alex. We've seen some deals that have taken place in the oil industry. We've seen Oando acquire Hajip assets. We've seen Chapa Energy acquire Equinor assets. Of course, Tony just spoke about Renaissance, acquisition of Shell assets. Right? Of course, there is Seplat, acquisition of Mobil. I guess my question is this: how have those divestments changed the ownership dynamics in the Nigeria oil and gas industry today? And what kind of responsibility do we expect of Nigerian operators?
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. See, Tony gave me this mic and it's not working. But when he used it, it was working. Take Renaissance. Good morning, everyone. I think we can all acknowledge that to run a business in this country for 24 years, not grow, just run the business, is a miracle in itself. But then to become the standard of global QC, quality check, for business activity in Nigeria, and I've experienced this personally. When companies want to do DD on you, they go and bring Business Day reports. They say, see what Business Day wrote about you. To attain that level of global recognition, ladies and gentlemen, please let's put our hands together for the CEO of BusinessDay, my other brother Frank. Thank you very much for all you do. It is easy to be a voice in a small room amongst friends. It is not easy to be a voice across a nation, a continent, or the world. You must always be criticized. Thank you for that. We're missing someone from this panel, Olu Vahen, who for me would have really brought a slightly different perspective perhaps, because we all speak from the same sort of perspective. I think everyone has said everything that we all think and we've discussed. But to your specific question about the deals that have happened, we've been led over the last 2 decades by what I call the fortunate child, where you give birth to a child in surplus. He perhaps does not understand the meaning of prudence, hard work, or indeed the effect of their behavior on the future generations. Oil was a blessing to the country. It came in, created a lot of petrodollars, and very quickly we became negligent in our responsibility in developing the sector. I think I would say 5 or 6 years ago, we reached rock bottom, where our production dropped to circa 600,000-700,000 barrels. We had 3 of our major trunk lines, all force majeured. And as operators, we could not go one day without recording at least 5 or 6 incidences on our pipelines. We had to take stock and imagine a world in which this continues. The industry would be dead in less than 5 years, apart from the offshore producers, who are largely international. So all of that value will leave the country. This presented 2 things, a blessing and a curse. The blessing being the fact that those that were looking for contracts and inflating contracts, well, there was no more development, so there was no contract to inflate, there was no contract to run after anymore. Those that were the naysayers in the industry and wanted to do other things other than develop the industry found that there was nothing to pilfer. So that was a blessing. We all had to turn our behaviors into additive or productive behaviors. And we saw the NMPC prior to now start to make a few changes around personnel, try to enforce some decency around contracting, etc. Now, the blessing was that it created the opportunities for the companies you see here. The international players were clear in their minds that this operating environment was not one they would tolerate, they could justify, or will pass any investment metric in their global portfolios. So they decided they will focus on the onshore and leave offshore and leave the onshore. And there was the blessing. They say local problems typically have local solutions. And these are the local solutions here. We were able to acquire these assets, and as you've listed, whether it's Seplat, whether it's ourselves, Owando, Renaissance, with the singular aim of turning around this story. We were also fortunate to have a president that is bold. If we start with the removal of subsidy to where we are today with the passing of the executive orders, he's made certain declarations that have changed the ecosystem for good. And we've seen an NMPC now that has been brought to the future, or at least its present day, with the right people in the right places. We have the leadership of BioJewelry, who is a seasoned professional, and an exco of truly talented people that understand what business efficiency and productivity is about. And we're feeling those effects. Bitter spoke about them, and the other panel spoke about them. I said this at the last panel I was in. My concern is if we don't get it right now, I worry that we may never get it right, because all the stars have aligned for us. A competent national oil company, because you must have an example, a leader in the industry. They are by far the largest producers amongst all of us. They are now cost-focused, they are value-driven, and they have a workforce that truly can change the direction and fortunes of this country. The local companies who have stepped up to take over ownerships of the land assets of the IOC, at least, or the shallow water. But we are not as buoyant as the international companies. So a lot of what we do is hinged on value. Every step we take, what is the value? Whether short-term, medium-term, or long-term. But around that value conversation is the fact that everything we do comes back to us. So when I sit with NMPC today, I'm fighting for value on the Owando side, but as a citizen of Nigeria, I'm fighting for value on the NMPC side. Because every barrel of oil they sell is for everyone in this room. So there is a huge shift in the mental posture of the players in the industry. The regulators have come to understand that as an industry, we all stand as one. From NNPC, the independent producers, the international oil producers, you name it. So we see a lot more collaboration between ourselves and the regulators now. Understanding what's required to move forward as a country, but as a sector or an industry, how we create value, not just for the country, but for every company here. So those transactions you've seen have changed the landscape, in my view, for the foreseeable future, but most importantly, we've seen a doubling of production and Renaissance. We've seen a doubling of production since we took over in September with the Owando JV. And I can tell you for a fact, Seplat is going to be announcing very soon, potentially, the same sort of strides. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Alex. Let me go back to Bite. Bite, obviously, for us to be able to move from reform to recovery, it requires some degree of collaboration. Now, my question is this. What do you think, or how do you think the stakeholders in the industry can better leverage partnership, innovation, and technology, to unlock value in the value chain in the industry?
Okay, thank you. If we go back 20 years ago, in our industry, we had probably about 7, 8 operators. Today, we're speaking about nothing less than 40 or more operators. And a lot of those additional operators have emerged off the back of already installed infrastructure that used to be one single integrated infrastructure. I think the first place where we can achieve those collaborations is to begin to recombine assets and operations in terms of how we use them. And the great thing is that even though those assets and mining leases have changed hands, there has been a constant factor. NNPC had remained constant. And so rather than each new operator proliferating assets, and NNPC can leverage its presence across multiple operators to force the usage of what used to be one single integrated infrastructure. I think that's one way where we can see that collaboration. Today, one of the greatest challenges we are facing in the industry is shortage of manpower. Today, if we don't take care, people like us who are sitting here will struggle to retire. Because when we look back, we don't see the funnel. And one key area of collaboration is us coming back to fund and sponsor training institutions that continue to produce the talent for the future, that continue to invest in R&D in partnership with universities whose outcomes will benefit the entire industry. So there are quite a lot of areas where we can leverage. And indeed, that is already happening. So for example, in our operations in Aradel, there are at least 2 marginal field operators who just started that funnel their production through our production infrastructure and take it to the point of sale. So it's us continue to find those areas. And I think one other area where we've done well as an industry is the umbrella bodies that we have, the OPTS and the IPPG, where we come together to continue to find those pockets of synergies that we can collaborate and just make our operations more seamless, more efficient, and share resources. There are also initiatives going on within the regulator today on certain asset sharing. So NUPLC today is looking at sponsoring rigs that a club of operators can come and share. Similar infrastructure also being roped into that construct that can allow collaboration and sharing of infrastructure. And the more of that we continue to initiate, not only as a government-led or regulated-led initiative, but as bilateral initiative, is one area where we can continue to create more value as an industry.
Thank you. Let me move to you, Tony. Right? We know that we've spoken about some of the reforms that have taken place in the industry today. And as we move from reform to recovery, there are opportunities to be unlocked. right? And there are challenges also. And my question to you is, how is Renaissance adapting its strategy and business model, to stay competitive and remain resilient?
Thank you very much. I've not gone to business school like my brother Alex, so I don't talk strategy. As you can expect, we've just taken over from Shell, mid-cycle. Shell came to Nigeria to do business, to look after its countries in Europe. I'm defining in my head, what am I about? And that is why, for where we are today, we are all about our vision more than strategy. And I actually talked about the vision earlier. It's very Afrocentric, it's very bullish. We want to be the African leader in energy. We want to enable energy security, and I will speak to energy security, and be the catalyst for industrialization in Nigeria. Will that be calling for one strategy to do that vision? No, there will be multiple strategies. But for where we are is even understanding first and foremost, what is our purpose? Now, when we talk energy security across Africa, there's the unfortunate data that of the 1.23 billion Africans there are, more than half, over 600 million people, do not have access to direct electricity in Africa. So we're asking ourselves questions as Renaissance, that new beginning, that new hope, renewed hope that we represent. What can we do about that? Think about it. What is energy security? In Nigeria today, there is a most unfortunate data of 100,000 people dying every year. This is half year now. If you're linear in thinking, 50,000 people have already died because they do not have access to clean energy. And I speak to it very passionately. Think about it. 100,000 people, mostly women and children. So painful. Think about that woman. Some people say to me, oh, I like Mama Put. I like Amala. I like this. Have you gone to the back room where this is made and see the amount of smoke that these people inhale? Think about that woman with one baby on her back, one on her left, one on her right, and they will walk into that kitchen and inhale that smoke. Their lungs are gone. That is one of the key narratives that as Renaissance, we want to change. My brother Sam just said we have 210 TCF of gas. What does it matter, even if you have 500 TCF of gas for that woman? That's what Renaissance is about. Industrialization is key to us, it's prime. Today, we are delivering 1.9 billion standard cubic feet of gas every day to NLNG. Fantastic. And I used to know a thing or two about NLNG. But that gas is for export. Yes, it brings revenue. But the gas that is required to industrialize Nigeria is not export gas. So we've got to start to reset our minds around what will it take to industrialize Nigeria, and that is what Renaissance is working towards. So when you ask me about strategy, it is the strategy to deliver this vision that we are working on, and in 100 days, I'm focusing more on transition than strategy.
Thank you so much, Tony. Sam, let me come back to you. Obviously, there is no way, when Tola was speaking, he spoke about some of the things that businesses need to do. And one of them that came out clearly from his presentation is technology. Technology is an enabler. We need to reduce the cost of doing business, especially operating cost per barrel in the oil and gas industry. So my question to you is, how has Seplat leveraged technology to improve operational efficiency?
Thank you very much for that. And I think I would really like to pivot from where Tony stopped. I would like to first of all say that since 2009, 2010, when Seplat Energy started its operations in Nigeria, we have seen technology as a key business enabler and a key driver. And we have actually leveraged that in a number of ways. At the moment, Tony talked about export gas. Seplat Energy today produces about 30% of the domestic gas needs of this country. Again, powering progress, powering the country, powering the industry, but it's not enough. And that is why I think with Renaissance also coming on board, then you see the partnership there. But let me leave that and then speak specifically to technology. In the domestic gas space, for instance, when Seplat took over one of the facilities in Auburn, it was a 90 million scopes per day capacity. We moved quickly and transformed that to 465 million standard cubic million scopes per day capacity. Today, producing at export capacities dry gas into the domestic market. And now this is what some of the key industries in the country are leveraging to grow. But let me then step back and speak to how we do this, because it's the how that is the most important thing. And then again, we are here on the panel today, but it's about what do we learn, what do we share, so that we can grow organically. I start with the people. For us to make sure that we deliver the business, we devote a lot of the technology in people empowerment and people development and people training. So we have a virtual reality center where we have operator training simulators, whereby we can keep our operators in a room and take them through the plant, through the facilities, and train them on how to operate the plant in a very efficient manner. That way, we create an enabling environment for capacity building and capacity development using that technology that is in-house, and then managing logistics. And we're not taking these people out to the Europe or to other parts of the world to go and train them, but then this is an in-house technology that we have installed. Then on running the assets in itself, we have also at the moment predictive analytics for our major equipment. Critical equipment like compressors, pumps, and all the mechanical equipment, we have predictive analytic tools on them. And what these tools will do for us is to help us tell us ahead of time when we need to carry out maintenance activities on them. This way, we proactively respond in a proactive manner instead of in a corrective manner, because if you wait and run the equipment to failure, then you come back and then you suffer some downtime. So with that alone, you can then see why we receive less calls from Abuja because of either lack of gas supply into the domestic grid and then causing the country not to function. I would possibly say one more and then I'll leave it there, because there are quite a lot of technologies that we deploy, which again, there is one that I can look up on my phone at the moment. We call it Seplat Virtual Asset Monitoring System. I can look up all my wells on my phone and then monitor the effectiveness and the efficiency of those wells. And then I can tune the wells and actually monitor the performance of the wells and ensure that the well is operating within a set envelope. So with that, what we have done in Seplat is we deploy technology to manage four things. Is either do things safely, do things in a more cost-effective manner, or do things faster, all for productive and efficiency. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We don't have that much time. We've got about 2 minutes and 20-something seconds. So what I'm going to do with the rest of the panel is that I'm going to ask you a series of rapid-fire questions. You don't need to think about it. It's a yes or no question, right? So I'm going to start with Alex. Well, Tony has already. Alex.
Testing.
Okay. Is yes or no? Will Nigeria achieve its net zero ambition by 2060? Yes or no?
I defer to Tony.
The question is, why does she have to achieve
No,
net
it's yes
zero?
or no, so that we can. Okay, we don't have that much time. Okay, let me go on to the next fire. Okay, so Tony, this is for you. Do you
take his own.
Okay, you want to take it now?
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, yes or no? Do you agree with OPEC strategy? You know, focusing on reclaiming market share rather than focusing on profitability, on higher prices? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, Vita. So this question is to you, right? Should Nigeria, yes or no, should Nigeria prioritize domestic demand of crude oil rather than export? Yes or no?
The answer should be both. We should prioritize both.
Okay, Samuel. Okay, in the budget 2025, they estimated the production benchmark is about 2.1 million barrels per day, right? We're currently struggling with 1.7 million barrels per day. So yes or no, for the rest of the year, will Nigeria achieve the 2.1 million target?
For this year?
For this year.
Realistically, no.
No. Okay, so I want you guys to answer this question, just yes or no, right? Oil price is just currently below $70. What is your outlook? Will it fall below $70 by the end of the year? Yes or no? Let me start with Samuel.
No.
Bitte?
I'm not sure.
Tony?
No, it's going to recover.
Alex?
We see a recovery, yes. Yeah,
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. Please, can you show your appreciation to my panelists? I think if there is one key takeaway from this session, is that definitely Nigeria is on the way, from reform to recovery. But we've also agreed that it needs a strategic planning, it requires innovation, and it requires collaboration. That is the only way we can get to the destination. And companies need to embrace change. They need to embrace technology for us to get to where we are. Thank you so much, everyone. Please show your appreciation to my panelists. Thank you very much.